Okay. And then on
So it's on with the Danny Matt translation?
So not with the Danny Matt translation, I don't think. Next. Okay. We're just co-sharing this with our Facebook page also, so that might attract some people. Oh, I appreciate your indulgence while we do that.
Michael joined us.
Hi, Michael Goldenberg, welcome.
Well, thank you. Nice to be here finally. Sorry if I'm late.
Okay. Okay. So we are live, and we are going to visit a teaching. This will get better as it's going. My Wi-Fi is a little weak, and so I have a range extender coming supposedly today, which will make me not have to work off my phone, which will make some of these things a little smoother to set up. I apologize for the 7-minute delay.
Would it help if we turn off our video? Does that help
you?
you?
No. It's good. It's good with the video. I think. Good. We're live. Okay. Great. So I didn't have the Wi-Fi set up that I needed for the whatever. It's irrelevant. Here we are. So we're live with the Zohar, and we're in the teaching of Rabbi Elazar. I'll do the screen share so that folks have access to the text on Sefaria. If you happen to be working off of the Daniel Matt edition of the Zohar, which is such an incredible translation, then you can find this on page 5. Okay, and if you're in, I guess if anyone has the photocopy from the Pirush HaSulam that we also have for the Hebrew, that you can find on page 13. Okay, so Bereshis, we're going to review this first paragraph here. We did this teaching a bunch last time, and so, but one of the things that I'm finding with this group in the Zohar is that doing things and then kind of like doing them a little again isn't the worst thing for this material, because sometimes you need to go through it one time just to like familiarize yourself with the concepts, and then another time to begin to unravel the mystery of the Zohar. So we're in the introduction, and this is Rabbi Elazar, the son of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. So Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai gave his introductory teaching about Bereshit, and if you remember, that was about Keruvim, this notion that the world is redeemed for children, which are kiravia, that it's like a keruv, an angel, is like an infant, and that it's for the sake of children that the world continues. And that was a very beautiful teaching, and there was more to it than that. Okay. Now, Bereshis, Rabbi Elazar Patach, Se'umarum enechem uvreu mi bara ela. So it says here, when I see a number of people have joined us, so welcome to whoever those people are, a lot of you. Lift your eyes on high and see, mi bara ela, who created these things. So this is a verse in Isaiah, and as I mentioned last time, it's about appreciation. It's about cultivation of awe. Look up high, and the plain meaning is see the stars, see the planets, just stop and smell the roses, as it were. And that's a way to have a sense of God, mi bara ela. And it's a theological statement, and it's a bit of a dogmatic, monotheistic theological statement. There is a God who created these things, and there aren't idols. The Zohar is going to flip it on its head a little bit. And it's asking the fundamental question: how do we relate to or know that there's a creator? And that's Bereshis. That's the introduction of Bereshis. How are we going to relate to the creator? So it says, "Umarum einechem la'anatar." So we'll just read from the translation because it's so beautiful. Lift your eyes on high. To which place or to which site? La'atar dechal einin talyan lei. And then it says, to the site which all eyes gaze. So it's interesting. We're already setting up this paradigm where each of us, with our subjective eyes, our own look, are looking objectively at one place. So we all have our own view to one thing. So everyone's spiritual journey is at once their own. It's through their eyes. But all eyes, all seekers here who are on a quest are seeking towards one unified place of creation. So that's working with, at this point, the monotheistic idea. Ru'mi bara ela. There's one God and not 10 and not 20 and not none, right? It's not non-theism, it's not Buddhism. Okay, uman ihu. So then it asks, what place is that everyone, in other words, because realistically, we don't all agree about these things. There are great differences of opinion about that one place. So manihu, who's that God? So it says, ptach einayim. That is a place called opening of the eyes. And as you may remember from last time, if you were there, what happened in opening of the eyes? It's an actual place in the Bible, in Tanakh. And there's one, it's mentioned once. It's a one-time mentioned place. Anyone remember what that place is?
Yaakov and the ladder?
Not Yaakov and the ladder, but it's a good guess.
Oh.
Tamar. I'm looking
Tamar,
at the note.
Yehuda
I'm
and
cheating.
Tamar. You're in the right place. Almost, Marvin. So Yehuda and Tamar. And what happens with Yehuda and Tamar, very, very briefly, right? Tamar is the daughter-in-law of Yehuda and marries one of his sons who dies, and another one who dies. There's Aaron, Onan, and then there's Shelah. And then the younger son, Yehuda doesn't, because of levirate marriage, you're supposed to give your other son to a daughter-in-law who dies without any offspring. And Yehuda, after 2 deaths, fearing maybe that she's like cursed or a witch or who knows in ancient context, right, doesn't give the final younger son to her when he becomes of marriageable age. At the time, he's too young to be married, and then he doesn't give her over. So she, in order to seek justice for him, right, dresses up as a zonah, as a prostitute, seduces him, and has a son. In other words, you're not going to give me your son to have a son. I will prove you the hypocrite and seduce you, since I'm entitled to that. So it's this place which all eyes gaze. So that's a bizarre statement of the Zohar. All the episodes in Tanakh to say, our unified root of theology is what? So now there's other things about Ptach Einayim, as the Midrashic tradition understands. She saw here that in the future, this act of sexual deceit and sort of acting as in this way would produce a line that would lead to the Messiah, to the redemption, to King David. It's the genealogy of King David. So she had a sort of prophecy about her possibly fraught action. You follow? That helped convince her that even though I'm not sure, I'm playing with black magic here a little, but it's the right thing to do. But there's something else about Ptach Einayim that I think I stressed last time, and again, it's just my take, which is that it relates to creation. In other words, if we're trying to figure out where creation is, so the place where we see creation is in creation, right? Or in this case, they're saying, they're making it very real. The place where we meet God in creation is in having children, and in Tamar's desperate attempt to have children, right? In other words, she she's desperate here, and she's willing even to, engage in kind of sin in order to do it. And so that's the sense, is that everyone, and this is a follow-up, you see, to the last teaching, that the world is redeemed for children. Here they're saying something related, which is that in the act of childbirth, or the desire to create. So where do we see God? In the miracle of creation, in our partnering with God in creation, but also in that desire of Tamar to do anything, even to fool her father-in-law and become a prostitute and trick him and play with power, to procreate. It's a very powerful instinct. So that's, do you see what the Zohar is doing here? It's saying, where you want to meet God, how do you know about God in creation? Through your own desire to create. And so they're psychologizing it inside a little bit. And our own desires to create necessitate sin sometimes, just as God's creation necessitated a world of good and evil.
I wasn't here last week, so I don't, if this is just summary, I don't want to derail, but I do have a thought here.
No, so there's that's one of the rules of mystic study, is that one must allow for questioning and comment.
So I wonder if you're stating it just a little bit too broadly. It can't just be your desire to procreate, overrides all sorts of sinning or something like that. It has to be some sort of profoundly justified desire to like following halakha, you were stressing Tamar, this was her right. She deserved this. So it wasn't just procreation in general, in which otherwise it would just be, everyone should just go have as much sex as possible. It has to be, justified, legitimate,
okay, so Andy touches on, many mystical traditions and pagan traditions and other traditions moved into these sort of like religious orgy type rites, right? Which the Bible has taboos against and is not foreign. So what's the difference between those sorts of sort of hippie pagan teachings? I'm linking hippies and pagans here in one big thing that'll offend everyone who's watching the live stream, but everyone in Providence. But the idea is, right, that it's justified, but they are choosing an example of Tamar, which is justified but questionable, right? They're choosing one on the fence. They're not choosing the cleanest example ever. They're choosing the one where she, acts like a prostitute to trick her father-in-law, who isn't the person she's supposed to have kids with, mind you. But she is justified ultimately. She's justified by the text. Yeah. Fair point. Okay. Now, I realized when I was reviewing this, I couldn't help but wonder if it's a play on Shelah, the son, and She'elah, the question, or not. The son that she's supposed to have kid with, or it's the question. I don't know if that's just an auditory resonance I'm imagining, or a real one. But so the Zohar then goes to say, it's in that place that you'll discover the concealed ancient one, susceptible to questioning, created these. Dekaima la she'elah. Read al tikre le she'elah, the kid to she'elah, le she'elah. I don't know, maybe. But to questioning. So here we're saying something that is like the who's on first. Mi bara ela. You want to know who created these things. Who created these things? Capital W. We'll note for today's teaching that WHO, WHO, is also the acronym for the World Health Organization. Shout out to all those people doing fine work. Who created these, right? So, in other words, one of the ways that we meet up with God isn't in our certainty about who he is and our theological definition, but rather it is in our posture of confusion. It's the wonder about God. Who is God? That is where we meet God. So it's in that moment of awe, like, who made these things? Which is something that we can have when looking at the stars, right? Who made these things? Or the basic question, why am I here? It's sort of a statement of the miraculous, like, we're here. That's not obvious. It's the first basic spiritual question. Wow. It's like, wow. So any questions? So, the verse now reads, look up and see who created these things. And they're rereading it. Who created these things? You'll actually meet God when you ask who. It's like who's on first? Who created these things? Who? No, I asked you who created these things. Who created them? Okay. Bara Ela. Good. But that's the teaching. Uman ihu, me. And who is it that made them? Me. Who? Who made them? So this right here is the who's on first. Man ihu, who made them? Who? Who deikre miksei hashemayim le'ela. And this is what's called the end of heaven above, or the boundary of heaven above. So if you're in the Sphirot chart, and by the way, anyone, whenever you have a question, please unmute yourself and just interrupt. I'm not monitoring if anyone's raising hands or anything. I'm too absorbed in the text, so just shout out. Who, so this is called the boundary of heaven above, which is the Sphira of Bina. I probably should get the Sphirot up on a chart. Hold on one second. Let me just load them. We have an image. But Bina, which it means wisdom or insight in a certain way, is the boundary of heaven above. Okay, we'll work with that in a bit. Dekola kaima bereshute. And this domain extends over everything. In other words, everything that comes in the world emanates out of Bina. So think of Bina here like the divine mother, the divine mother. That's what you're going for. And in the Kabbalah, Bina is often called aim or mother. And there's this sense in which this thing, this wonder, mi bara ela, is the governing, understandable principle of all of creation. It's in everything comes out of Bina. Everything that exists. This is the first place, and everything is subsumed under this emanative principle or idea. And so it says, since it can be questioned, yet remains concealed and unrevealed, it's called me. So this part of God is called me because you can only ask about who, but you'll never know God. You can never really know God. Right? And so here, the Zohar meets sort of Maimonidean negative theology in a certain sense, or other negative theologies, or even Buddhist non-theism in certain senses, in certain ways, right? By saying, you'll never really know God, but what you will know is there's like a limit to your understanding, and it's the desire to know that sort of forms a boundary, and everything else that we know is underneath that. Okay, no questioning beyond that.
Rabbi, just
yeah,
I'm new here. So
yes, that's fine, and this will take some time, but that's okay.
But are we just playing with the word me? I'm mem yud. Is that what where we are right now? I mean,
right now we're playing with the word me in.
Yeah.
Say more. In the pasuk, mi bara ela, who created these? You see, because there's a verse that says in Isaiah, "Se'u marom einechem," look up high, u're'u, and see mi bara ela. And so they're rereading it, the question, as a statement, and rereading the statement as a question.
Okay.
Now, me and ela, can you see my pointer or no?
Yes.
So me and Ela are going to combine into Elohim soon enough. They're going to form a merger. So the name game isn't just me. The name game has an end, you follow. But we're not there yet.
Okay, I'm with you.
Cool. So mi bara Ela is going to become Elohim. Did people see that? If you take the letters Mem and Yud and the other letters Aleph, Lamed, and Hey and combine them, what do you get? With a little, you get Elohim, God. So they're not done, but now they're on the me part of it.
Can I ask a question about just the surface meaning of the text?
Yes, of course.
As I'm first of all noticing the Safaria translation is very different from the one we bought from the Matt translation. But
Yeah, the Sfaria translation hasn't translated the Zohar, so these are just whatever translations have been uploaded by users.
yeah, no, I like the Matt one better, not necessarily for accuracy, but just it reads a little smoother. But so lift your eyes on high, literal on the surface means like look up at the sky, right?
Yeah.
So then when it says the sight towards which all eyes gaze, and that becomes the petach einayim, but is the first thought we're just looking up at the sky and we're asking who created the whole cosmos, and that brings us to God on one sort of superficial level.
That's the Isaiah verse, yeah.
That's the Isaiah verse, got it. And then connecting this to petach einayim is like going on some different level.
So Aryeh Kaplan has claimed that this is a meditative instruction in his book on Kabbalah and meditation.
Okay.
And actually, it's changed from looking up at the sky to looking within, right? And so it's changing it from eye to mind's eye, as it were. And that the Zohar is rereading, like, if you want to really know who created you, have to, like, meditate on your deepest desires.
So what I was seeing here is like the sight towards which all eyes gaze. Such a nice bit of poetry, right? So your first thought is, I don't know, if you're looking up, it's going to be the sky. But that sight is the very opening of the eyes, which is taking you not from what the eyes see, but the very phenomenon of sight, the ability to see, which is a much more profound thing, right? Consciousness, and that's turning us inwards. So I'm going that way with that. So instead of looking outwards, the direction, when you say what we're gazing at is the opening of the eyes themselves, it's time to reflect on the very activity or process of sight itself.
Just working with the name of that place rather than what happened in that place. But the name of the place
it's not just the miracle of the creation of the cosmos, but the miracle of consciousness and spiritual awareness, which then invites the question, who created that as well? So it's right. This is going along with your point, like it has this superficial reading is the objectivity of looking outward at a world, but you would quickly get into this sort of subjectivity and spiritual awareness by
that's
the
beautiful,
opening, by
right?
On the opening of the eyes.
Yeah, that's really beautiful, right? Just the act of opening eyes or of consciousness or perception. Right. Yes, that's a beautiful point.
And that's where we discover the concealed ancient one is in in our spiritual awareness, as opposed to in the cosmos itself, which we also discover him there, but hidden. But it's consciousness that we're going to find. Another source of finding HaKodesh Baruch Hu. Yeah, so it's interesting because they're really working with two different ways, right? There are sort of two classic ways that people often find God in nature and in religious experience, right? In the external world and the internal world. And here the Zohar is merging them into one interesting kind of thing. That's a beautiful point. Thank you for raising that. And maybe that's even more important, right? Petach einayim, than what happened there. What happened there is an interesting commentary on that idea in some way of tomorrow's consciousness. What happens there in this note, it's like this is a gateway through which divine presence manifests itself, but that is also all the more true in spiritual consciousness, right? Like it's through our spiritual consciousness that we most directly connect to Hashem. Nice. Now, is ara latata v'ikre ma. So there are two boundaries to heaven. There's mi and ma. Mi is the upper boundary up here. It's actually, I'm glad that my background is the cosmos today of some kind or another, because this is the right thing. So there's mi above and there's ma below. Mi, of course, means who, and ma means what. And so everything we know about God is within the boundaries of these two questions, and asking one will get you to the other. So let's do that. Ma ben hai lahai. What is between, or what is the difference between this one and that one? So what's the difference between these two questions, between these boundaries of heaven? And if you're working in the Sfirot, ma, or what, is Shechina, is the indwelling divine presence. But that's technical. It'll emerge from here. You don't need that. Ela kadma stima deikre mi kaima. Okay, they give us a quote text here. La she'ela.
Kevan de sha'albar nashim mefashresh listaklo leminda midarga ledargad, so-called dargan, kevan de mate taman ma yadata, ma istakalta, ma pishpashta, hakola sasim kintakamita. So I wanted to read that in the full in the Aramaic because it has a flow. I'll read it in the English now. You want to keep the flow going there. This end of heaven is called who? There is another below called what? What distinguishes the two? The first, concealed one, called who, can be questioned. Once a human being questions and searches, contemplating and knowing rung after rung to the very last rung, once one reaches there, what? What do you know? What have you contemplated? For what have you searched? All is concealed, as before. And so there's this beautiful, me is Bina, the indwelling divine presence, and Ma is Shechina. Me is Bina, the divine mother above, and Ma is, think of Ma as like the woman in the Kabbalah that gives birth to actual things, or the Shechina, the divine presence that lives here, like tangible things, like Zoom and Zoom windows, the most tangible thing in anyone's life these days. So a lot of times our spiritual search can lead us to a place of ego, of I know this, feelings of pride, Pesach is coming, chametz, of rising, right? That's a natural, and that can manifest in different ways. It can manifest in critique of other people's practice that is rooted not in legitimate concern for them, and like, I think maybe have you considered this, but rooted in you're wrong and I'm better, and it's rooted in a sense of wanting the superiority. So this is another sort of remake of that, because once you do this and you go from me, the highest place anyone can know, to Ma, the most tangible place of seeing the divine presence in the physical world, once you know everything there is possible to know, essentially, once you know every mystical secret there is in the entire Zohar, what will you be left with? Well, so that's the answer. You'll be left with a different question. Instead of who, you'll be left with the question of what. What do you know? What have you contemplated? For what have you searched? All is concealed as before. So everything is different and nothing's different. You understand? In other words, in the end, so let's just talk about the question what for a minute. What is like a question when we see things, instead of asking who, right, which is a question about like how something came to be, an emanation, what is asking about the telos, or the significance of a thing, about purpose or meaning. Does that make sense? So one is a question of origin or of priority, and another is a question of purpose. Oh, yeah, you can come in. It's okay. We have a visitor, a little visitor. So
it's for the sake of the child that the whole world
is for the sake of, yes, that's right. So you understand here that what, it's like in the end, we should come back to this place of what do I know? Who am I kind of a thing, but not who am I, like, what am I? Oh. Hi. So I just want to leave that open, and maybe if anyone wants to discuss, this feels like a natural pausing place. In other words, our questioning will only in the end ever lead to more questions. That's the statement here. You know, even after you know everything and you're the biggest master, all you're going to be left with in the end is a deeper sense of question. Anyone want to reflect on that?
So there seems to be in this text no difference with the questions you have about the higher rungs than you have about the lower rungs. It all seems to be unanswerable questions in the end.
Good. So all of these questions in the end are fundamentally unanswerable. In other words, we never know who created these things, or we only know who created these things through questioning. It's that affinity with the energy of me that we'll know it. And it's the same with Ma. So in a sense, there's a dissatisfaction with all spiritual answers here. Or in other words, if one is looking for the answer, capital T, capital A, you're never going to get it. So that's right.
Well, what about the real big question of why? Is that going to be coming up at some point?
Well, that's 4 syllables, 4 letters anyway, or three syllables.
Well, why in Hebrew, lama is lima, for what. So why and what are kind of the same question in Hebrew.
Oh, okay. Well, that
No,
llama.
I meant that not as a I got you, but as a, although yes, but more as a like I think the ma question is the why question. For what purpose? Otherwise known as why does this exist? And for that, right? So here they're kind of saying that this lessens our attachment a little bit to the ideas. Like the quest is more important than the answer. Or here the question is actually how we know God, and the answer is false or gets in the way of the questing. And so the Zohar, in its inner perception of eyes, Andy, is setting up an orientation of seeking, Marvin. It's kind of saying, and Alvin, right? Rabbi Contra, you'll never know the, my apologies, you'll never know the answer. Or every answer is tenuous and could become the ego and could get in the way of questioning, or could puff up the self, which would get in the way of the ability to lessen the ego and connect with otherness, or our own sense of wonder. Our sense that we know stuff is what stops us from being curious, and that's what the Zohar is saying. The more you know and the more you know and the more you know, ultimately, it should come back to you'll ask better questions. Okay. Al Raza Dana Kativ.
Wait, can I?
Yes,
can I
of
chime in
course.
for a sec?
Chime away.
I'm fascinated. I'm fascinated by the fact that the 2 questions, the who and the what, are separated by a great distance on the Sphero chart. Like, comparatively great distance, right? So
yeah.
I understand Bina and B remains concealed, and we're going to get no traction there. But that we put what or with Shekhinah and Malchut makes it seem like it's accessible or almost accessible. We can touch that, and asking what or why, is that supposed to lead us up the chart of the Sphirot till we get to who, at which point we realize that's totally concealed, and in fact, it's only an illusion that asking what and moving upwards gives us any progress, because until we understand Hashem, then ultimately we don't understand anything. We only have like this illusion of grasping something on the lower levels. Is that?
Yeah, so there's something in the Kabbalah called the Yichud Ma Uban. Ma is Ma and Ban is Bina. And it's the practice of this teaching. It's a meditation. Sorry about the, well, it's for the sake of the world. So the Yichud Ma Uban basically says that it works as a circle, not as a ladder. And so one can start at any end, although in this teaching, we've started at me and we've come to ma. And in the ma uban, you start at ma and you come to
your audio
bina.
Is delaying. Is anyone else hearing that too?
Can you hear me? So let me know if you can hear me, Andy. Yeah? Can you hear me?
Anyone else having audio problems with Rabbi Dolinger?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I take over.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
So I'm sure he'll come back. Oh, there he is.
Well,
can you hear me?
Yes.
Are we live?
You want to turn off your video? That was a good idea. Maybe without your video, your audio will be better.
His video is here. Oh, there, no video.
Okay, can you hear me?
That sounded good.
Sorry about that. Okay. All good. So Yichud Ma'uban, Andy, to answer your question, is this idea that when one asks the question ma, one comes to the question me, and when one asks the question me, one comes to the question ma, and it works as a kind of circle. And so in that practice, one starts by asking the question ma, works one's way up the sphirot, and then comes ultimately the question me, and then comes back down. That yichud, a practice of meditation, is prominent in the Zohar. It's referred to ma'uban frequently. and from Ma and Bina. And so I don't know if that answers your question.
It does. And is there literally, do they stop at every sphera along the way? And, are there steps, or is it just go straight from Malchut to Bina and back?
So in the real Yichud Ma'uban, not only do they stop at every step along the way, but they make it a 50-stepper. There are 50 steps in the Yichud Ma'uban. It's a 50-part meditation.
Holy
twice.
Cow.
So
Twice.
each way. And the way you get that is you go through the 7 lower sfirot, multiplying them. So in other words, in Malchut, there's Chesed Sheba Malchut, Gevura Sheba Malchut, Tiferet Sheba Malchut, Netzach Sheba Malchut, Hod Sheba Malchut, Netzach Sheba Malchut, Malchut Sheba Malchut. So you work up Malchut Sheba Malchut, Netzach, Hod, etc. You go up the chart, and then you get to the next one. So they multiply with each other actually in this thing, because each one contains some element of the other because they're interactive. So in the real Yichud Ma'uban, you stop to meditate on each step of the multiplication of the sfirot with each other from Malchut up through Chesed, and then you come to Bina, and then you come back down.
Wow. Okay, that's great.
Does that answer your question?
It does. I mean, it's like a beginning. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a very powerful practice. We did a modified version of it in our Jewish meditation class, and it was the only one, we did it twice, where people reliably had mystical experiences.
Right.
So that's also an interesting thing. It is, by the way, the practice of counting the Omer, which the Kabbalists added afterwards, in the prayer after counting the Omer and the Siddur, they added this Yichud in.
And it makes sense because, if you're trying to get any grasp on who, which is ultimately impossible, but the Sefirot are, that's the chart of God's internal, nature or essence. So you'd have to reflect on each one of them in their combinations with each other. That would be the very process of understanding the who's, at the top of the process. So
right. And after doing that, what's kind of interesting is, so it's like beginner's mind. I'll give an earthly metaphor. I achieved the level of black belt back when. Now I can't even manage to cook lunch on time. But back when, once upon a time, I was able to pass a black belt test after years of doing jujitsu. And a grandmaster, the Okimoto grandmaster from Japan, came, and we were instructed by our sensei we should all wear white belts in front of Okimoto master. And it was an interesting experience. He threw me across the entire dojo with a pinky blindfolded. I was surprised. The instruction was just to attack this very old man who was sitting there, Seiza, Japanese style. It was like very old and frail, and he was no longer living. And so I came at him from behind thinking I was fine. And somehow he took his pinky and I wound up on the other side of the dojo. And I understood why I was instructed to put my white belt on for meeting Okimoto master. And so it's that sense, right, which is like after all of this work, right, we're come back to this plain sense of just asking this simple question, who? In other words, being a mystic doesn't make you better than anyone else. That's the sense in which I think, you can do all of these things and then me,
Right. Well, there you were a master before you were put in the presence of a real master, and then
right, exactly.
Right?
Well, so that's what they're saying, right? We may think we're masters, but once we're in the presence of the real master, Kadosh Baruch Hu, then you get thrown across the dojo in this metaphor. Okay. Now, al raza denaktiv ma'idech madam melach. So, quoting Eicha. About this secret, it's written, well, I'll read the translation because it's so pretty. Concerning this mystery, it is written, what can I take as a witness to you? What can I compare to you? Now, actually, the quotation doesn't give us the full sense of it. So let me go. I've saved, where am I? I should have like saves. Let me pull up the full verse. Are you still seeing the screen share or no?
No. And I was going to ask you, what page were you on? We can find it ourselves on Safaria.
Oh, that's a good point. I'm on Svaria Zohar 1.1b, but let me load the screen share.
Or maybe you can just send a link to everyone so they could have it separate to avoid the video problem, because the audio is much, much better without the video.
Really? Okay. I'm getting better Wi-Fi today, so next time it'll be better. I put the link in the chat. Let me share it as well. I put the link in the chat. So if we look at Eicha,
Okay.
the full verse is Ma'idech Ma'adam Elach. What can I take as a witness to you? What can I compare you to? Habat Yerushalayim Ma'ashvelach. Daughter of Jerusalem, what can I compare it to? Va'nachamech, and comfort you. Betulat Bat Zion, Virgin of Zion. Ki gadol kayam shivrech, because your destruction is as great as the ocean. Me, your palach. Who will heal you? Me, your palach. So this verse, understand that they're quoting, is more interesting than that. It starts with ma and it ends with me. So they're choosing, they don't quote the full verse here, but the end of the verse is, who will heal you? So it's asking a question about, if we can only ask questions, there's an existential pain that comes with human existence, of never being satisfied. Just because I'm occasionally giving theological overlaps with other religions and mystical traditions, here in this sense, the Zohar is not far from the Buddhist concept of dukkha, that everything is temporary and therefore unsatisfactory, or that there's Buddha's first noble truth, yes? That life is unsatisfactory, that everything is unsatisfactory fundamentally. Nothing is satisfying because it passes, even good things. So here the Zohar is working with this existential non-satisfaction, and it's relating that as the exile. We're quoting from the book of Lamentations, which is about the destruction of Jerusalem and God's exile from the temple. And so it says, what can I take as witness to you? What can I compare you to? Kad itrachiv be mikdasha nafiklav amar ma'idech uma'adam elach. So when the Holy Temple was destroyed, a voice cried out, what can I take as witness to you? What can I compare you to? Ba'hu b'chol yoma v'yoma. So, right, the answer is, I take what as a witness to you? I take the question what? Or the idea of Shekhinah, the idea of the divine presence. V'ha ashidas bach miyomen kadman dichtiv hayidoti b'chem hayom et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. So what do we mean by we take what as a witness? The question is, what can I take as a, now that God's temple is destroyed and we're in exile in the world, this is a theodicy question. The world is full of pain and viruses and collapse and uncertainty. And so where is God in this world? Mr. Rogers said it's in the helpers. Mr. Rogers famously said, always look for the helpers. And that's an answer some people give to the Holocaust, right? It's in the people. The Zohar is giving a theodicy question answer here. You know, where will we find God in a world where his Shekhinah is exiled, where the destruction of Jerusalem occurred? And so the answer is Ma. The answer here is in, so Ma is the Shekhinah, in the Shekhinah's exile. So just like, okay, here's the interesting thing about Shekhinah, or divine presence. It's equated with us, with we Israel in this sense. So we're in exile, but God is also in exile. In other words, if we think we are in pain and dissatisfaction, so too the divine presence is in that place. Ma has gone there. God also doesn't understand the purpose. And so basically the Zohar's answer here is God asks the same question. You know, if you're wondering like, where is God in this world? God's wondering that too, in a certain sense. Because it's not that way. It's a world of emanation, and we exist in partnership or as a manifestation of divine presence, right? We're B'tzam Elohim, And so in our asking our pain over that question, it's present and it exists within the divine world, which contains God. Does that make sense? So the Zohar is kind of doing this interesting move here. Every single day I have called witnesses against you since days of old, that is written. So this is from the Tochacha, the rebuke in Devarim. I call heaven and earth, which are Shechina also, to witness against you this day. Uma Adam elach vahi gavna mamash. So this is the key thing. Uma Adam elach vahu gavna mamash. I compare you to what? Exactly. In other words, you are the divine presence or something close to that, right? You are Ma. You are the divine presence in the world that wonders where is the divine presence in the world. So this is something like Mr. Rogers' answer. Well, the query, that's maybe the poll question, is the Zohar's answer to, where do you see God in destruction, the same as Mr. Rogers, who said in the helpers. Here the Zohar says, Ma Adam elach hu gavna mamash. You are Ma. You are the question one. You're an embodiment of the divine presence in the world, which manifests as perplexity at the purpose of existence. Atarit lach be'itrin kadishin avadit lach shalatnu al alma dichtiv hazot ha'ir shiyomru klilat yofi misos kala aretz. So I crowned you with holy crowns, gave you dominion over the world, speaking to Israel here, as it is written, 2 verses later in Lamentations, is this the city that was called perfect crown of beauty? And they don't quote the rest of the verse, but it's a famous description of Jerusalem, misos kala aretz, the joy of the whole earth. So it says here, Karinan lach Yerushalayim habnuya ki'ir shechubra la. So people know, Yerushalayim habnuya. Features in the Seder, right? L'shana haba Yerushalayim habnuya. Next year in the rebuilt Jerusalem. So here I've called to you the rebuilt Jerusalem ki'ir shechubra la, which what is it? It's the how do they translate it here? A city bound together. Bound together here is like me and Ma. It binds heaven and earth, you understand. It takes the physical and brings it to the spiritual. That's the city, and you are like the city Jerusalem. Each person here is their own mini Jerusalem, exiled and in pain, with God who is exiled and in pain, asking Ma and me in a series of questions. And so our verse, I'll just read it once more. Ma'idech, what can I take as witness against you? Ma Adam elach, habat Yerushalayim, ma shvelach, what can I compare it to? Va'anachamech, to comfort you, betulat bat Zion, distraught virgin of Zion. Ki gadol kayam shivrech, because your pain is as vast as the ocean. Mi yir palach, who will heal you? It's like mi bara elah, who will heal you? And so here Bina sets up as this divine mother, as a comfort to us in a time of distress or pain, as a source of healing and refuah. Mi yirpalach, right? What will heal us in our pain is being able to get to the point where we're able to have a sense of awe at the mystery. Me, when we can ask, wow, we're here. Who makes this? Can help us transcend the pain. So I like to think of this like this. I'm going to turn on the video for a minute because I need my hands. I need to gesticulate. So I'm going to pause. That was a lot of technical stuff. You may be lost, so I want to just pause for a question, reflection.
Before you gesticulate?
Yeah.
This is such a complicated passage. I don't really understand how the concept of witness is being used throughout this. It seemed to me when you raise it as a theodicy question, like how do we understand all the evil in the world given God's sovereignty?
Right, or in the passage it's specific and local to an event. It's not a broad theodicy. It's how do we understand, they're working from Lamentations, so it's how do we understand the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem?
And then, some of these lines are, every single day I call witnesses against you. So that sounds like you deserved it, right? Like we're testifying Is that how it's being used? We're testifying against you. You deserved what happened. That doesn't sound like consolation exactly. It sounds like, you deserve this. But then on the other hand, somehow this witness concept is being used in terms of consolation. So I'm just not clear on how the witness concept.
Okay, good. So this is a clarifying question. As hidat, right? Vahas hidat bach miyom, this sahadi is witness in Aramaic. How are we, in what way are the witnesses being used here? So this case, right, it's interesting. This is God talking about us, and the witnesses are testifying against us, right? But we started, yeah.
And I have one more point. But on the other hand, witnesses seem to be used in this sort of, doesn't fit with the English use of the word witness, but witnesses are called in order to describe you. Like, how shall I compare you? What shall I compare you to? How shall I understand you? So witnesses, rather, in addition to testifying against you, which is like the most literal English sense, are also in some context where witnesses are the ones who tell us who you are or what you are, describe you, and then begin. So it's the witnesses who are saying, you're like the Shekhinah. Israel is like Shekhinah, right? Like, that's how we'll understand the people of Israel.
So the Zohar is flipping the concept of witnessing here in a powerful way that contains this negative connotation, but adds a positive connotation alongside it. In the Haidoti Bachem Hayom Et Hashemayim Ve'et Haaretz, there's a sense of, in your pain and your isolation, the very act of exile, pain, and isolation are things that leave us, by definition, alone. Actually, this is a great teaching for today, because we are all in a form of bidud, of isolation. Echa yashva badad, the Hebrew word for quarantine is bidud, and that is the way Echa opens, how the city is badad, alone. No one is there, and there's this sense in which Jerusalem is suffering alone. It's not just that it's empty, it's that no one knows the pain. Like, God's presence is there, and there are foxes crawling over the temple. Like, no one knows this is such a holy place. And the world is kind of like that, or we're all like that. So it's that we're alone in our pain, but also the very psychology of pain, which is part of maybe what the Zohar is getting at, is one of exile, of feeling alone or disconnected. Because when I'm in pain, I tend to think that no one can understand my pain, no one can feel my pain, and there are these laments, right? Like, who will know my pain, right? Because people want to be heard. And sometimes people in a lot of pain become really annoying to other people who aren't in pain, because they seem self-obsessed. That's the way people...
They want it to be acknowledged.
They want to be acknowledged that it's hard for them right then and there. And actually, when everyone's going through it, it's like a collective thing, so it's a little easier. But when you're alone, and Shiva is part of that, right? We give people a ton of attention when they've lost someone and are in grief, right? And they get to sulk. We don't tell them, no, don't, stop being so obsessed with yourself and your pain. Move on, get back to work. No, we say, we're all going to come to your house. Don't cook a meal. Don't worry about it. Just tell us about it, So that's the practice. So here, witnessing takes on the sense of, yeah, I'm with you. So I observed the extent to which, in the pshat, in the plain meaning, it's your fault that you got exiled. You all couldn't get along. Sinat chinam, baseless hatred, caused the destruction of the temple, and a failure to follow social distancing guidelines has exacerbated, and governmental incompetence have combined to exacerbate this virus. But the witnessing also says, I see what you're going through, and I'm with you here. I think, does that answer the question, Andy, a little bit about
as you're speaking? Yeah, no, it actually helps a lot, because as you're speaking, I'm sorry, is that Marvin?
No.
Oh, I thought you said something. As you were speaking, Rabbi, I was seeing the two different senses really merging, because the degree to which you deserve what happens to you is the degree to which the universe is just. It has a moral structure, and recognizing that it has a moral structure is part of recognizing that, Hashem's sovereignty over the whole thing. So you are not alone, and, your suffering is witnessed because it's produced by this moral system that God has created. So they're two different concepts, but they're really flip sides of the same thing.
Said well. I have to say, I'm glad to have such an articulate philosopher on the Zohar thing, because
you gave me the idea, but thank you.
I'll confess, I struggle with words to describe a concept I can sort of name in my head, but it takes a lot of words sometimes to get to it. And so I appreciate the way in which you accurately, succinctly, and intelligently describe it. Okay, let's say that. Any other questions?
You gave the rough draft, and I just edited it to the final draft.
Yeah,
So.
well, you can be my editor.
Thank you.
Okay, so so that's part of where we are now. It's gonna deepen it a little bit. Ma ashvelach. What can I compare you to? Kigavna de ant yatva hachi hu kivyachol le'ela. So this is an interesting idea. Just as you are quarantined, so is it above, as it were, kivyachol, so to speak. So here we deal with two concepts. We had before mamash. You are literally Shekhinah. In other words, God actually dwells in you. That's mamash, really. But here we have kivyachol, so to speak, which means the opposite of mamash. It means sort of.
We're losing your audio there, Rabbi.
I'll stop the video to recapture the audio. Do you have me, Marv? And can you hear me? Can anyone hear me? Bueller? Anyone hear me?
No, I can't really understand it, no.
We hear you, but it's bad. So if you could turn off your video again.
I did that.
Now it just went off. So try speaking.
Hello.
Hello. That was good.
Okay, cool. So there's mamash and there's kivyachol. Mamash is really exact, and we just used mamash before. Can you still hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Mamash. So mamash is you are really Shekhinah. That's what we said. Kigavna. Just like there is this thing, above ma, you here are embodying it. So God is exiled, you're exiled. Mamash. It's real. It's not a figure of speech. But here we have kivyachol, a figure of speech. Kigavna de andiat vahachi hu kivyachol le'ela. So we've said something interesting, that one thing is both literally true and also not literally true, only a figure of speech, describing the very same concept, which is interesting. We've said it's precisely exactly true, and we've also said it's, so to speak, it's true. Which is part of this mystery of God, right, of emanation of tzimtzum. This alludes to the idea of tzimtzum, that God, which is what? That in order to, how can we get an infinite God in a finite world? So the answer is precisely, we absolutely can. God can do whatever, and the answer is kivyachol. It's a figure of speech. It's a metaphor. So hachi hu kivyachol le'ela. Just as you sit desolate, so is it above, as it were. You're alone. God is above too. Everything that happens here has a mirror in the spiritual realm. Kigavna de la'alin hashtabach ama kadisha besidrin kadishin. Hachi omena lach de la el ana le'ela ade ulimbach uklusach letata. Just as the holy people do not enter you in holy array, so I swear to you that I myself will not enter above until your inhabitants enter you below. Enter here is Jerusalem. And the answer is, we're talking about returning to Jerusalem. Like, when will God's presence re-enter the temple? When will God be manifest in the world? When will we experience the clarity and the joy that come with that? So the answer is, I won't do it above until you do it below. Do you follow? In other words, I'm going to wait for you. This is the concept of hit overroot de litata, right? I won't do it ye'ulin above until uchlusach litata, until you do it below. In other words, so this is Mr. Rogers. Back to Mr. Rogers. We bring the redemption. You do it, and since you are causing the spiritual, God doesn't just act. God is in a dynamic interplay with you, and you're a part of that. And so when you cause the divine presence to come back, that's when God can re-enter Jerusalem above. V'da'ihu nachama dilach, hayil dedarga da ashvelach bekola. So this is the consolation. I compare this rung to you completely. You want to know what's the consolation. It's a painful world. What's the consolation of living in such a painful world? Answer, the consolation of living in a painful world is that you have agency and can make it better. That's the nechama. The nechama is that you can do something about it. Now, I'll finish the teaching and then we'll discuss. This is the end of the verse, which isn't quoted. Now that the verse in Echama, Damelach, Mashvelach, now that your ruin is as vast as the ocean. So since your pain is so great, it's as great as the ocean, which is sort of infinitely vast. When you sit and look out at the ocean, you can't see the end, right? It just goes on and on. So your pain just goes on and on. So since that is your pain, if you say you cannot endure or be healed, mi yirpa lach. So if you say, look, your pain in this world is so great, you just don't know what to do. Mi yirpa lach. Who? This spiritual practice of coming to a place. Now we're going from below, above, Andy, right? So we're doing the other side of it, coming from ma to me. This pain will heal you. Sorry, not this pain. This question, me. Who created these things? Looking and saying, mi bara ele petachinayim, consciousness, appreciation of the fact that we can observe the pain itself will heal us. Vadayahu darga stima ila dechola kaima beyir palach v'yokim lach. That concealed high rung in which all exists will heal you and raise you up. So that's this part of the teaching. What I wanted to say is that I think a lot of times we think of the pain, like before it was coronavirus, it was political dysfunction. Do people remember when that was the big concern? Anyone remember when that was the worry?
Has that stopped being a concern?
Remember that far back.
It was not that long ago. So I just want to make sure you could hear me and everyone's awake. So there are all these concerns that are layered on, right? Like about actual life and things that happen. But here the pain is more existential than that, right? It doesn't require a specific bad thing to happen. The pain is the sense of general dissatisfaction. It's the exile of the Shekhinah, or it's like the Buddha said, that life is full of suffering kind of a thing, right? There's this sense that, and there's also this other deeper layer. It's not just that things don't cause pain, that pain is inevitable, but it's that there's something much more deep than that, and it's a sense of wonder. This sense of wonder is more profound than our sense of pain. That's the Jewish teaching here, which is very different than any Buddhist teaching, right? Which is that we transcend pain, or we raise to a higher level, as it said, from the pain. Pain happens at the level of ma, at the level of Shekhinah, where it's exiled and disconnected from me. In other words, when we lose the sense of awe, who created this incredible thing, then all we're left with is the embodiment of the pain. But there's a sense of elevating pain to this place where it's healed or dissipates. And that's what this practice is about, is when we can come from a sense of ma, what is this? And why am I going through all of this pain? Or why is there so much suffering in this world? Or the coronavirus, or the exile from Jerusalem, or Israel's low position. There's the Jewish specific version, or the general human version. But when we can elevate that to this sense of me, the Zohar is saying, then we can be healed. So wow, but I'm here. And it's kind of saying that's a deeper level of the human psyche or experience than the pain. Right. So that's, yeah.
But pain, as we all know, can be debilitating sometimes. And the question is, how do you get everything together to get to reach to that me?
Yeah, right. So that's what the Zohar is saying. Gadol kayam shivrich. Your pain is like the ocean, and when you're drowning in the ocean, you can't appreciate a beach umbrella, right? You're drowning in the ocean, and so how do you get out of that pain, which feels like a trap, right? Like a straitjacket. How do you get out of that? How do you do the mystical Houdini? So
Right.
that's what this practice is trying to tell you, is you can do it by moving from the question of ma to the question of me. So in some sense, the answer is actually really simple. You might just ask the question, me. Well, gosh, instead of asking the question, ma, why is this happening? Why me? To quote Nancy Kerrigan. You might ask the question, right? And that's I think a good summary of it. You might ask me. Well, gosh, or to recultivate mi bara ela, who created it? Like, okay, I'm in a sense of pain right now, but me, wow, to step out of ourselves or to observe our pain like a third person. So that's what the Zohar is sort of saying, to observe oneself in pain, and to then be able to raise that and say, me, who, to move to a sense of awe or wonder. You're asking how, Marvin, I think. How do you do that in a moment of pain to move to me?
Right.
I don't know if anyone wants to weigh in. They're suggesting that asking the question, me, can do that. In other words, to stepping back and saying, well, like, who made this? Or like, I exist. The Baal Shem Tov had a practical version of this. He used to ask himself the question, Halo chai anochi, am I not alive? So the Zohar is kind of saying that, like, who made me alive? Am I not alive is a version of that.
You could contrast, not that I have a secret to how to overcome debilitating pain, but you could contrast like the worldview of an impersonal universe. It's just a mechanical universe with things following the laws of nature versus the personal universe, Hashem, the me who's behind it all. And if you have belief and evidence or faith in the idea that the universe is personal, then you have the possibility of understanding your suffering as having a meaning or a purpose or a point. And it's not, not to diminish debilitating suffering, because that's an enormous problem in every respect, but it's not just suffering that's bad for human beings, it's meaningless suffering. And as long as you can believe your suffering has a point or a purpose or is justified, I don't know, it's more than a coping mechanism. And I'm partly reminded of, I think it's a Talmudic story, it's in the Midrash about Rabbi Akiva while he was being flayed. And you please correct me on the details, but Rabbi Akiva, the Roman, he's one of the martyrs, being literally his skin being peeled off, and apparently he smiled or he was happy during that moment. And the question is raised, like, how is that possible that he could be happy or smile in this moment when his skin is being peeled off on his way to his death? And I guess Akiva answers, so this is a midrash, Rabbi Akiva answers, it was only in that moment that I understood the commandment to serve God with all your heart and all your soul, and this was my opportunity to do that. And that's obviously, Rabbi Akiva's beyond all of us, obviously, but that's the idea, that this moment of unbelievable suffering